here anymore. And I have a very bad memory. So I decided to start writing memoir. I thought that's where I was going. And about a year or two later, I got connected somehow with a challenge for picture book writing. You come up with 30 ideas in 30 days, and then you kind of branch out to write picture books from there. And then another group, 12 by 12. And I thought picture books were going to be my thing. And I loved writing them, but it just seems like no one was, they all thought they were written well, but it was just something about the book that just didn't work well. And I just didn't have, I'm too verbose, cannot make a story in 800 words. Actually, now it's probably, I'd say 400 to 600 words for a picture book lately. That's what publishers want. So it's very hard for me to write a story with those few words. So an author friend of mine suggested I branch out into middle grade, and that's my sweet spot. I can use up to 50,000 words, and I can explain a lot more and share more history and characterization. So that's where I am. But I knew, I wanted to show you this. I knew I was going to be a writer when I found one of my favorite books as a child. It's Do You Know? It's a little Bible story quiz thing. And when I opened it up, I found this and realized that I guess I thought I could write a better story than what was in the book here, and I wrote myself. But I tell the kids when I show them this, I said, don't do this to your books. Don't scribble all over your books. But anyway, that showed me that I was truly wanted to be an author back in those days. So anyway, as I was mentioning, my passion, of course, is writing. And I'm also becoming a minimalist. As I get older, I just feel so burdened by all the stuff I have and all the things to do and my schedule and even things not related to writing, and just feel this big burden, this heaviness, and have just had a desire to just clear things out. In fact, probably for the last 10 years, I've been trying to do this, just to get rid of things and just keep the things that are important. And it actually kind of tipped over into my writing. I have FOMO, which is, as you know, fear of missing out. And so I join all kinds of groups, and I write all kinds of stories and do all kinds of challenges and connect with all kinds of people. And pretty soon I just feel so overwhelmed. I don't know where to focus anymore. So that's why I came up with this talk, the Minimalist Writer. So I'm hoping that it's encouraging to you. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, those of you that are listening, is to, in the chat, if you can find the chat, I think it's down at the bottom somewhere, tell me 3 things, actually. And you can do it in the same email. Since there are a few of us, it shouldn't be too difficult. Oh, by the way, before I forget, Larissa is going to send you, after the presentation, an email with a PDF that has the notes and also links that you can go to from my talk. But certainly keep notes if you have other things you want to write. I don't, that's fine. Totally up to you. But if you would write in the chat, if you are a beginning writer, intermediate writer, or advanced writer, you can determine that any way you want. If you want to include a genre you like to write in, that's fine too. And then tell me one thing that you find frustrating in the writer's life. It could relate to minimalism, being a minimalistic writer. It could be something else. But anyway, you can write those 3 things. Again, do you consider yourself a beginner, intermediate, or advanced writer? Maybe the genre that you write in. If you don't, do you have any particular, you don't have to write anything. And then what's one thing that frustrates you about writing process or the writing life, or and like I said, it doesn't have to relate to this talk, just to kind of give me a feel for who you are and what you do. So maybe I can mention some of those things in my talk. So, and then Larissa, whenever you gather those things, I can continue, to talk. But right now, I guess now is the time that I share my screen. Is that right?
You can go ahead and do that. Yep.
Okay. And let's see what okay, so they have the PowerPoint here.
Does everybody see where the chat is? Okay. I can.
Let's see
can
if
also-
this would, okay. You want me to wait a minute or should I go ahead?
I have one from Kathy. Let's just see. Okay, just a moment.
Okay.
Okay, from Kathy, I have intermediate writer. And Kathy has a book due out in spring of 2021,
Excellent.
she does not feel like an expert at writing yet. And Donita says she's a beginning writer. She writes fiction using family history. She's just getting started. I don't have anything from Peg yet.
Well, if you happen to, come later, feel free to interrupt me and you can let me know. But that's great, Kathy, that you have a book coming out. That's super. You'll have to tell me or mention it in Q&A or something, because I'd love to hear about that. And I don't think, even if I've only published one book, but even if I published 10, I hear from my other friends that have published more that you still never feel, not only do you not feel like you're as accomplished as you should be, that there's a lot more you could do. And even after you look at your published book, you're reading through it and you kind of wince, ooh, I shouldn't have said that, or that's not the way I went. So you're never truly happy with that. But another thing is, and it just escaped me. Anyway, people are always, I know what it is. They're always afraid, even if they've written 10, 20, 30 books, they're always afraid that they'll never come up with an idea for their next book. And so that is very common. And hopefully something in my presentation will click and will help you in your writing journey. And even I think Peg said she's a beginner, even in yours, that there'll be something you can start out with. So I'm hoping that this will be helpful to all of you. So, okay, so sorry?
You have an answer from Peg now.
Okay. Oh, Peg, okay.
Peg is an intermediate writer with technical writing, such as newsletters and instructions. And she gets frustrated with not being interesting.
Well, when you're technically writing, writing technical stuff, that's hard to be, I suppose you could do it creatively, but it doesn't lend itself like fiction would. So maybe there's something here that I can connect you with that will give you some encouragement there. So this is why I've written, put together the Minimalist Writer 7 Necessary Things. So what are those things? And you're thinking 7 things, that's a lot. It doesn't seem like minimalism. Well, you'll see. It will as we move forward, that we don't have to do everything. There are just a few things that we really should be doing. And writing is a wonderful profession. It's an honorable profession. You're not going to make millions in writing. You might not even be able to live off writing, but it's really the passion for writing and your audience that makes you keep going, which I love. And I love Martin Luther's saying here, quote, if you want to change the world, pick up your pen and write. And it is an honorable profession. And I'm blessed to be able to be an author, to connect with people, to inform them, inspire them, encourage them. And that's why I write. So have you heard you can't do it all? With FOMO, I thought I could, and I found out very quickly that I would get exhausted. So there are really only 7 necessary things. You don't have to stress. And when I picked this photo, this is from our botanic gardens, there are not 7 flowers, there are 6. So I didn't want you to think I was trying to. I just love the simplicity and the beauty of the illustrations, of the image. So I was hoping that I could find one with 7 things, and I couldn't. So anyway, here we go. So the first thing, of course, is to read. Now, I have the second, well, I'll tell you later, but you need to read. If you're going to be a writer, it's very important that you read, because that's where you get ideas. That is where you find out, especially not with classics so much, but with up-to-date, modern, maybe New York Times bestseller, whatever, what's being published and what's popular these days. And because things are quite different, as I was telling Kathy, as we all know from the days from our childhood. The stories we would read as kids are different than the stories that they're writing and publishing today. So read broadly. I would suggest the classics. I love the classics. And I love this. I was in Charleston last year in January, and this happened to be the front of a business. And I just, that's perfect. I love collecting images that reflect my writing life. So you want to read what you love. If you, for instance, I'm a historical fiction writer, and I love historical fiction. My favorite genre, or my favorite era, is World War II. I find so many heroes and heroines in World War II that I love to read. And I learned a lot of my history in that way, hoping, choosing authors, hopefully, that are accurate and with notes in the back and that kinds of thing. But I also, sometimes I get so fixated and so connected with historical fiction. Most of them are adult, but there are kids' historical fictions that I need to read as well, that I forget there are other genres out there, and I just don't read them. And so I force myself to read what you don't necessarily like. So it's good to try an opposite genre for variety. So I just finished today an audiobook called Tuck Everlasting. Larissa, you probably know the book. It's a cute little story, and I don't know when it was written. It's certainly not a classic from my childhood, but a story that revolves around a stream that gives you eternal life, and just the question. It's kind of a fantasy. I guess I'd call it a fantasy story. Very cute for kids. It's a middle grade novel. Would you choose, if you could choose to live forever, would you do so? And what are the ups? What are the downs? And just a cute little story of relationships and friendships and reaching out and stretching. And I was glad I read it, because it was totally out of my genre, but really enjoyed it. So that's an example of reading outside your genre. It doesn't mean that all of you have to do half and half, but at least maybe once every 5 to 7 to 10 books, you should read something that's outside your genre. And if you're an adult writer, read something for kids. If you're a kids writer, read something for adults. So you can stretch in that way. This is just my part of my children's bookshelf. I was given this Language in the Wardrobe Narnia series years ago by a former boyfriend. And so that was more recent, but my book house, many of you maybe know of the book house. My mother collected this for me, and it has fairy tales, it has poems, it has historical things. It's jam-packed full of all kinds of great things. So that's what I grew up on, my book house. So where do you find your reads? Obviously, the local library. A great place, as Larissa, knows, is, and those of you that work in the library, your librarian is fabulous. You can just say, I'm looking for a book like Tucker Everlasting for middle grade, or YA, or kids book. Can you suggest anything? And they are really good at finding something for you. I'm sure you may know about Goodreads. If you don't, I would suggest that if you're a reader, that you sign up for Goodreads, and it's just another social media, but more related to books, and sign up. And that's the way I keep track of, not only do I do a review each time I read, not only star it, but also write a review. It keeps track for me of what kind of books, what books I've read, which is great, because I don't remember a lot of times. And it also, if it has a way of sharing with all the other people you connect with there of your books and their books with you. So it's great. And of course, Amazon, you can type in sci-fi or fantasy or dystopia or whatever you're interested in, and you can come up with, hundreds of them. Also recommendations from your friends or from a book club. I'm sure the Public Galena Library has book clubs, and most libraries do. That's just another way to find it. And there are many ways. There's ebook and audiobook, many ways to read. So the second thing is write. I actually have one more that I might put. I was debating whether I should put it in here instead of here, but let's just put it here. So you need to write. If you want to be a writer, obviously you need to write. I went to Highlights Foundation. Do you remember the Highlights magazine that we used to find in dentist's office? And so they have a whole campus and a beautiful place out in the woods in, is it New York, Pennsylvania, I think it is. And it's a writer's retreat, and they have classes and things. And so one year around Halloween, I spent a weekend there writing. And they had these little story rocks, or these rocks with, they must have had 100 of them in one area next to the lodge, and they all had separate words on them. And so I brought 3 words together here. And I'm just thankful that I have a pen and a story to write, and I just brought those 3 together. So it goes up without saying that if you want to write, be a writer, you have to write. And when I was in I was in England, in the UK, in England. It just escaped me the name of the town where the Brontes lived. I'll think of it in a minute. But when I went into their bookshop, their souvenir shop, I found this saying from Charlotte Bronte. Jane Eyre is my favorite classic novel. I'm just going to write because I cannot help it. And that's exactly what a writer does. Regardless of whether they get paid, regardless of who reads it, they just have to write. And there are a lot of ways to write too. It's not necessarily writing books. It could be, and I'll talk about this later, but how often should you write? Good thing you asked. You should really be writing every day in some way, but don't feel, like that's oppressive or worry that you can't do it or don't worry about it, because there are many ways to write. You may be a blogger. A blog post is writing. You may love to write in a diary. That's an entry, and that's writing. You may love to write long letters to your family and friends. That's also writing. Maybe you write articles, or the technical writing that I think was Peg was a technical writer. You can write observations. Maybe you keep a book of, if you travel and you observe people in an airport or on an airplane, you've got all kinds of fodder for stories. Even a social media post, if it's well composed, can count as writing. Another way is to use story prompts, and I give you some examples in the PDF that Larissa will send to you. That's another way. Every morning you can start the day with a story prompt, and just set your timer and start writing for, maybe you want to set it for 15 minutes. Get your story prompt out. You can get them online. There's books of story prompts. And just start writing for 15 minutes, keep them in a file, and maybe one of those will turn into a bigger story, a short story, and then maybe it'll turn into a novel. You just never know. So story prompts are great. That's another way to write. By the way, and I don't remember if I mentioned this in the notes, but I forgot her name, Cameron. She writes on the Writing Life. And she has something called morning pages that she suggests writers do. And that basically is, how in the morning you've got your head full of, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And so many things that you just can't concentrate on writing because you're thinking of all the things you have to do, or this problem that's coming up, or this event that's coming up. She suggests that you write 3 pages every day, every morning when you get up, or when you're ready after your cup of coffee or tea. And you just start scribbling whatever comes to your mind. I'm so tired this morning. I didn't get enough sleep, and I've got so much to do. And whatever it is, it's not meant to be a story or something that turns into a story. It's just getting all the stuff, the garbage that's in your mind, out on paper. And then you have time. Your mind is open for writing. And I love Julie Cameron is her name. And the name of the book will come to me, but she writes on the Writing Life. She's very popular, and you'll see her on Amazon. So you need to write. You need a place and time to actually write. You can pick a place. It could be a comfy chair in the corner of a room. It could be, maybe you're lucky to have a separate room. maybe your house is so busy, there's just one little corner, like I mentioned here, a corner of a room that you can write in. Maybe it's beautiful weather all year round where you're living. Certainly not in the Midwest, but and you can be outside or on your closed-in porch, enclosed porch. Just pick a place. Maybe you like to go out for coffee and want to go to the coffee shop and write. That's fine too. And pick a time. Time when it's quiet, when you're waiting. Many young moms will, or even grandmas that take their kids' places, their grandkids' places, while they're waiting for them or at the doctor's office. They can scribble out a little bit. I have a hard time with that. I can't do that because I have to be quiet and have a big bulk of time. But some can write like that, and that's great. And then pick a focus. Why are you writing what you're writing at the time? And do you plan to have it turn into an article? Or are you just writing a letter to someone or maybe a memoir? Pick a focus. So this is the one. This is number 3, inspire. And I did not know if I wanted to put that after read or actually put it at the very beginning. I struggled with that. I actually had it farther down in the line and I brought it back up. So I might put this after read, because if you read it and get inspired, then you have something to write. But I love to travel. That's where I get my inspiration. That's the first place. I've been all over the world and been on all continents except for Antarctica. And just love traveling. I love cultures. My mother instilled that in me. Love different cultures, love European cultures in particular, because that's my background. But I've been to South America and been to Turkey and to Singapore and Papua New Guinea. I was a missionary for 2 years out in the bush where there was no electricity. And that was quite an experience. I was in my 30s at the time, from 30 to 33. And that was quite the experience. And I actually wrote a few stories about some kids in the village. So travel is my inspiration, which is why I have the globe here. I also like to find those, as I mentioned, people in history. They could be an adult that did something heroic that nobody knows about, or very few people know about, and I would write about that. Or I write about a famous person that their childhood. For instance, I wrote about Mad King Ludwig with Neuschwanstein in Germany, the big castle, fairy tale castle. I wrote about him as a child. I also did Peter the Great. I wrote a little picture book, a historical fiction picture book about Peter the Great as a child and what made him the man he was. So I'm fascinated with that kind of thing. So you may have something, that makes you curious. I was in Bath, England a few years ago with my daughter, and we went to Sally Lunn's bun shop to have buns since they're so well known. And there was a little museum down below, and come to find out that Sally Lunn possibly could have been a Huguenot that had escaped France and come to England during the 1700s, during the uprising there. They were being persecuted, and that she possibly could have come to England and started this, the bun shop. But there's just a little shred of evidence. There's not much at all, but that sparked something in me. And so I wrote a whole story about Sally Lund, or Solange Lyon, which is where they think Sally Lund came from, and about how she got there and what happened to her later. So, totally fictitious, but it's a little grain of truth that came from that. So history may be your thing. My motto is never stop exploring. Whatever you're interested in, just go for it and explore, and you'll get plenty of inspiration. So what's your passion? Mine is historical fiction and travel. Yours may be something else. Do you love to garden? Do you love historical events? How about mysteries? My husband and I love to watch mysteries. Do you love nature? Famous or infamous people? Do you love sports? There's so many topics that you could write about that you're interested in. They could turn into articles. They can turn into stories, newspaper articles, all kinds of things. So it should start with something you're interested in or curious about. And then from there, you'll have some topics to write about, as I mentioned here. Another thing you need to do as a writer is to connect. I have had lots of opportunities especially since my book came out with Ambassador International a year ago, April 26th, to connect at conferences. This was the Evangelical Church Library Association convention. And I met this young lady who had written a book about her life coming over from, I don't remember the country it was, but anyway, she wrote this book about her experience about escaping from, I believe she was a refugee for a time. And it was just so neat to connect with her. She shared her story on a panel, and I just loved it. And I just wanted my photo taken with her. But just such rich connections with other authors. And I loved that. That's one of my favorite things about being an author, is connecting with the others, because everybody has a story to tell, no matter what culture you're from. It's a wonderful opportunity. So you can connect with readers. That's important, of course, as an author, with other writers or with professionals, people like publishers and agents. When you get to the point where you've written something and polished it to be sent to a publisher or agent, you want to connect with them. Readers, of course, are everywhere. They're all over libraries and all over the internet. Writers you can connect with, and I'll share a few ways. And then, of course, professionals. And the professionals could also include librarians, teachers, those that as a children's writer, I would be connecting with, because I'm a children's writer. So where do you connect with these? You can connect on social media, of course. I don't know if you're aware of it, if any of you are on social media, but Facebook in particular. But Facebook has something called groups. And within each group, and actually Goodreads has something like this too, you can type in the group bar at the top, the search bar, writers, authors, historical fiction, sports, like I mentioned, gardening, whatever your passion is. And you will see a list of all of the people that are in this group that have the same passion as you do. And each one has their own little rules, and you ask to join, and they'll tell you what the group is about, what they do, how often you can post, that sort of thing. And you can also tell when their last post was. So if you see that their last post was like a year ago, you probably wouldn't want to join, because they're not really active. Another place are writers groups. A lot of libraries, I'm not sure if Larissa can tell you, but if there's a writers group at the Galena Library, there is in Park Ridge. We have a writers group that meets on Wednesday nights. But I'll mention a few other places where there are writers groups as well. Many organizations that I'll mention later, and plenty of websites, which I've mentioned in the PDF that Larissa will send you. I have a number of links to many of those. Social media, and it sounds like I'm saying that you need to be part of all of these. Okay, I'm not saying that, because then it wouldn't be a minimalist writer's talk. So you pick one of these things. That's really what we're to do. Each one of these, you can connect with one person. You can, well, of course, you can't just read one book, but maybe one book at a time. Write one thing at a time if you don't want to go off on all different tangents that might frustrate you. But I just learned this recently, that each social media has a different purpose. So Facebook, which I love, that's my very favorite social media. It's usually for older groups. It's interesting, once the older people took over, all the young people left and went to Instagram, which I thought was funny. But so it's for an older population, those people who love to share multiple links and information, which I do. I love to do that kind of thing. And it's easy to share, which is what I like about Facebook as well. Instagram is generally the younger crowd. They like to have one stellar image usually that tells a story, and have a lot of hashtags to connect with. But as an author, they give you the opportunity to have an author's page. Just as in Facebook, I can have an author's page separate from my personal Facebook page, which I really like. And I can do Facebook Live there. There are lots of other things I can do. Instagram, I actually have an Instagram business account or author's account. and I can connect with librarians and with teachers and with other writers and authors. And a lot of them do, oh my goodness, bookstagrams. They like to put their book that they're reading in a nice little, they'll put dishes and doilies and tablecloths and scarves around it to make it look really cool, and then share the book that they're reading. And that's very popular on Instagram. LinkedIn, if you're a business person, if you own a bookstore or library, or maybe you have a business in mentoring or editing, copy editing or something, LinkedIn is usually the place where people go. Same thing with Twitter. Twitter are for professionals, for agents, editors, teachers, librarians, and authors that want to connect and actually have a conversation, which I still have not figured Twitter out, but I'm on it. Unfortunately, as an author, I'm on all of these. I'm just not active on all of them. I think I'd go crazy if I was. So really, Facebook is my go-to. And Instagram is, I think, my second favorite. But I only go on right before I go to bed, maybe about 10 o'clock or so. I'll spend about a half an hour or less on each one of these. Well, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and just quickly go through things if there are any messages, or post one thing, and that's it. I don't spend a lot of time. So pick one. You don't have to pick all of them. Just pick one and see what it's like. So writers organizations, and I also have links for these. These are another way to connect. SEBWI is what I am part of. That's the Society for Children's Book and Book Writers and Illustrators. That is the kind of overarching best and biggest organization for people that write for children, and YA as well. I'm also part of the American Christian Fiction Writers organization. Word Weavers is similar to that, but they're basically critique groups, and another organization that connects. I'm on online critique group, and once on Wednesdays, actually tomorrow morning, called Page 22, and I have other like-minded writers that we all critique each other's work, which is a great opportunity. If you love writing mystery, there's a Mystery Writers of America. If you write romance, there's the Romance Writers of America. If you like sci-fi and fantasy, there's Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. So whatever genre you like, you write, you can find an organization. And certainly don't sign up for all of them. That also would pick one to start off. If you've never done this, just pick one, and it will really simplify things. And once you get into one, you will make all kinds of connections for things online and with people that will help you, and with critique groups. You don't have to be a part of all of them to find these things. Just be part of one, and it will branch out from there. This is another thing. If you like challenges, that's how I write. I wrote my 50,000 word middle grade historical fiction based at the World Columbian Exposition of 1893. It's a middle grade novel. I wrote that in 1 month with NaNoWriMo. That's National Novel Writing Month. That is in November. And you write 50,000 words in 1 month. It's 1,666 words a day. That was quite a challenge. I actually prepared the month before with all kinds of information about the fair and downloaded things, did my research, and then I wrote the whole month. I just finished a little challenge, 5-day challenge to write a scene. There's all kinds of groups that you can become a part of to encourage you to write. 12 by 12 is writing 12 picture books in 12 months. I was part of this group, but when I moved on to middle grade, I no longer became a member, which I was disappointed at, because I made some really, really good picture book writer friends that I still am friends with today. Children's Book Insider, lots of this group actually has classes. You'll find classes within 12 by 12 and Children's Book Insider. There's also something called the Insecure Writer Support Group that's actually online that will have a lot of help for you as a writer. Then there are writers' websites, the Write Conversation, Writers Helping Writers. They have a whole, every day they come with information, how to write, how to hone your skills, how to revise. These are great options for you, and you'll get links for all of these. Janice Hardy is another one, and you'll see the link for hers. One Stop for Writers is an incredible website that you pay for yearly. Well worth it if you want to If you write novels and you want to build characters and build setting and plot and all that kind of thing, they have an online, I don't use this as much as I should, but online, what would you call it? Online resource that you just, you can find, you can plug in your characters and build them, settings, all kinds of things. So this also will be on your PDF. So another thing you need to do is be part of a critique group. You read, you write, you need to be inspired, you need to connect with people. You also need a critique group. And I had mentioned that Word Weavers and most of, or I would probably say all of the professional groups that you're part of. So that's why I say if you're only part of one, it will be okay. Because within that group, they will have critique groups that you can join. Start out with one critique group, or maybe you have one critique partner. You can meet online or you can meet in person. When you go to a conference, you will connect with people at the conference, and you may find somebody in your area that also writes, and then you can get together and critique each other's work. But you need someone outside of yourself and your family members who all think your writing is great, every word. You need someone that has a different perspective. And so a critique group is very important. And as I mentioned, every writer needs one. They can have just one partner or a group, but start out with one. And I mentioned the places, the writers associations, the writers conferences, craft books, online Facebook groups. And I gave you a number of craft books to read through. If you're in an area that you can't connect, certainly you can connect online, but if you don't have one in person, there are a lot of craft books that will take you through your story and help you revise it. So, and online Facebook groups, as I mentioned, they will help you as well. The hardest thing for me to do, you've probably all heard this, you've got to kill your darlings. What that means for a writer is you've got this really great character that in your book, and you just love this character, and you love the way the character talks, and you love his or her attitude and the way he dresses and swaggers and all this. And you get to a critique group and somebody says, you know, that character really isn't working. You got to get rid of her. And you're like, what? Get rid of my darling? No way. But a lot of times, in order to make a good book great, you've got to get rid of characters or a scene or a certain plot or a setting, some dialogue. There's always something that you can take out. So that's the hardest part about critiquing, but it's always meant for good to help you. And then, as I mentioned, to be a good writer, you need to get rid of words, phrases, paragraphs, characters, or scenes that don't work to make your body of work better. Another thing that is very important to do is to read your work out loud. In fact, in critique groups, we read our stories out loud. We read each other's stories. And I can't tell you how many times I have to circle a word because I have my manuscript in front of me and somebody else is reading it. I have to circle words that they stumble over. So if the person reading your manuscript or you stumble over some words, that means that it's not worded properly, and you need to change the wording because whether or not the work is, if it's an adult fiction, you're not going to be reading that out loud. But even adult work, you need to read out loud. Now, some computers have the ability to highlight the text of your manuscript and read it out loud to you. You can do that too. Sometimes it's better for you to read, but certainly that's another way if you have no one else to read or have a family member read it. And you get some really good insights into your story by doing that. Okay, so when you get to the point where you've read, you're inspired, you've written something, you've connected with people and gotten in some good groups, you've taken courses, you've been in a critique group, and you get to the point where you think your story is polished and ready to go, you want to submit it, because if you don't submit it, then it's never going to get published if that's your what you intend to do. Important to make sure that it is to the point where it can be submitted. And there are ways to do that. Obviously, if you're part of a critique group and you've taken courses online, which there are many, and I've mentioned some in the the PDF, and you feel like you're ready, then it's time to submit to agents and editors. I would do either. Some people think, oh, I'm gonna submit to an agent. That's more important. Not necessarily. Editors are just as important. That means that your body of work goes right to the editor. If they choose to publish your book, then all your royalties come to you. If you decide that you want to have an agent, who I'm actually looking for an agent, I've been rejected a few times, probably quite a few times. Not because my work isn't good. They actually say it's good work. It's just not something for me at this time, which could mean we're just about to publish something like that, or I have something else coming down the pike just like it, and I just can't take two on, or it's just not popular, and publishers won't want it. There are many agents that say, if I can't, knowing your work or reading your first few pages and your summary or your synopsis, if I can't think of 3 publishers that'll immediately want to read this, then I can't accept it. And you can understand, because they get 10, probably 15 to 20%, probably 15% of your royalties. So they want to make sure that they find you a good deal, and it works for both of you. So both of them are good, agents and editors. And as I mentioned, if it's been edited and revised many times, you can send it if it's best it can be. And it needs to be submitted in publishing industry format, which is something you need to learn. I give you a resource called the Writer's Market Guide. Every year they come out with it. It gives you all those parameters, all that information, and you have to read the publisher's website submission guidelines, because they'll tell you exactly how to do it and exactly what it's going to look like. Because if you don't submit it properly, then they immediately, they won't read it. If you send it in a document, a PDF form, and they ask you to cut and paste it into the email, and it comes with a PDF, a little attachment, they won't accept it. So you have to be really careful. If it's what the industry is looking for, as I said, that's why you read outside your genre and what's popular, to see what they're publishing, and if it'll fit in with the stories in your genre already published and applauded. So you can try this. Do an Amazon search of your genre, what's popular, and maybe read a few of those books. And as I mentioned, use the current Writer's Market Guide. There's one for every year. 2020 is out right now, of course. Connect with other writers who have been submitting. And I'm part of a lot of email lists that interview authors about how they got their agents. And that's helpful to know how that works. There are tons of podcasts and blog posts and tweets of agents and what they're looking for. Podcasts are gold. If you can, and you can just, within the podcast, you can actually type in, writers group. And I think I might have mentioned a few. If I didn't, please get back to me, and you've got my email address, you have my website. Get back to me, because podcasts about writing are gold too. They're very, very helpful. And lastly, mentor. This is, I don't know if any of you read biblical fiction, but this is Misu Andrews. She is the foremost, probably next to Lynn Austin, the most popular biblical fiction author out there. And she's been so kind. I met her at a conference in SoCal last year, and spent time talking with her about her book, of course, and she signed it. I actually gave her a copy of my book. But she's so encouraging. I connect with her on her website. I'm on social media with her. I've been on her book launch teams. If you ever get a chance to be on a book launch team, if you're invited to that, it's great. It's a great way to get to know what the writing life is like and what it's like to be published. And I've been on, I think I was on 5 this last few months, which is hectic. And I'm not following my own protocol about being a minimalist writer, but I just want to give back so much. And that's part of mentoring, is giving back to writers and to other writers and to those above you that are far beyond you, and those that are underneath you. That's very important. And so you can find fellow authors in critique groups. You can find them online groups, professional organizations, same places, writers' conferences and contests. maybe you know somebody at your church or at the library or in your school, or maybe your grandkids might like to write and you want to help them. There are lots of different ways to find writers that are that that are behind you, a little behind you in writing, and you can bring them alongside and share with them the resources that you have found to help you in your writing. And I highly recommend it, because once you learn these things, it's good to pass it on to others, because it just helps solidify that in your mind. So these are the 7 necessary things to read, inspire. Here's where I put it second: write, connect, critique, submit, and then mentor. Keep it simple. You don't need to do it all. And like I said, read, if you want to read one book at a time, by all means. Inspire, go on one trip, take a trip to a museum, whatever inspires you. Go to a game, garden, go to a gardening club, go to the nearest, what am I trying to say, nursery. And maybe you want to write a column about, or an article about gardening. All different ways that you can do this. Connect with one group, have one critique group, and then choose one place to submit, and then one person to mentor. So not overwhelming. So I hope that this has been an encouragement to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. All this information is also in the PDF. I'd love you to visit my website if you want to sign up for my newsletter. This is where I really follow my minimalist rule. I only blog at most twice a month and send generally one newsletter a month. So you probably will only hear from me 3 times a month, which isn't a whole lot. But I'd like to inspire and inform generally about historical things, about other authors or books, or about travel. Those are the kinds of things that you'll hear from me. So I would love it if you do that. So I think that that's probably the last one. Yeah, that is. Okay. So does anybody have any questions for me? I would love to answer any questions you have.
You talked about the social media, on Facebook. You talked about having there, you can have an author's page. Do you ever would you ever have a page that just is the book that you're going to have, or what should it be, the author's page, or both?
Well, that's what it is. An author's page. You highlight your book, and the things you talk about are related to your book. For instance, my book is historical fiction, biblical fiction. So anytime I hear something about Syrian refugees, or about the latest book of historical fiction that a friend of mine wrote, or some interesting thing from a website on history, or just the craft of writing, then I share it. So that's what it's for.
So you're sharing things about writing, not just things about the books that you've written.
Right. Oh no, yeah. In fact, they often say that you do not want to overload, that it should be 80-20. So 80% of the things that you post should be other things, and 20% should be about your book. Yeah, because otherwise it's just you're trying to sell your book and nobody's interested.
Yeah, nobody else going to want to look at it.
Exactly.
And is that automatically connected if you have another Facebook page?
I think if I remember right, I think you need to have a personal page before you have an author's page.
So you get on your personal page and you get a new page from there.
Somewhere there. Yeah, I think there's in the bar up above or something, it'll say a page. Do you want to start a page? Or the word is page. So if just look for the little prompt that said not open a page, I forget, but anyway, it's called a page.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they ask you what kind of genre are you, are you a media person? Are you in music? Are you an arts person? And you kind of,
so you would put writer in that
right. Yes.
In that place. Okay.
Or something, at least the arts. I don't think it has something for writer author, but I think the arts, there might be something for arts or journalism or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Trying to think if there's anything else.
Mhm.
You know, I'm working right now on all of the side things that I have to do for this book that's coming out.
Mhm.
And that's so much harder than just writing the book in the first place.
It's
So much work.
much harder. In fact,
Much work.
that's another presentation that I'll eventually put together. I think I started is on marketing, minimalist marketing, which kind of
Right.
doesn't sound like it's
Yeah.
possible, but yeah,
Even if you
that's
have a kind of traditional publisher, you still have to do so much of it yourself.
you do. There are even the top five,
Mm-hmm.
Scholastic and Penguin, and
Mhm.
they don't have the staff they used to. The only benefit, well, there are a lot of benefits.
Mhm.
One of the main benefits of being part of the big five is that they're already well connected to
Mhm.
libraries and bookstores and things, and they put your book immediately into one of their catalogs, and so it's
Mhm.
its own advertising. And
Mhm.
sometimes they'll have a publicist that will help you get uh,
Mhm.
talk, author talks and that kind of thing,
Sure. Yeah,
but not always.
no, this group that I'm with is saying you have to hire your own publicist. If you want
Oh,
a publicist, you hire
oh
your
my
own,
goodness.
which evidently that's not
Um,
uncommon anymore
right.
because it's a smaller publisher. Um, and it's kind of okay. In this day and age, do I need a publicist? I mean, they're supposed to set up, book signings and things like that. I'm not sure that's even going to be anything I'm going to be
Well,
able to do.
yes, and they say that it's not. By the way, I didn't ask you what is the topic or the genre of your
Oh,
book?
it's a memoir of my childhood growing up
Oh,
Catholic. Basically,
oh, okay.
it's very humorous. It's very funny
Yeah.
because it was a funny time. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and we were a wild, crazy family. Still
Oh,
are.
fun,
So
fun.
yeah. So it started out as a short story and ended up being lots of stories. But
Cool.
yeah. So
Well, and then that's where you kind of hone in on the Catholic, faith, and
right,
find
right,
communities and church
right.
groups.
Yeah. I'm
That
not
would
sure
be
they're all going to like what I have to say about it, though.
that's true. Yeah. Well, then I'm trying to think of where. Anyway, you might find a humorist group, or
Yeah.
you never know
Yeah.
what you can find on in these groups. People to
Yeah.
connect with. But
I,
yeah,
I- I'm I'm fairly kind about it, but it was a long time ago. They've changed a lot of their dogma since then.
uh,
It was a lot more severe, but I was
right.
going still. Um, yeah. There was something else I was going to ask. Oh, website. Would
Mhm.
you have a website as an author's website or authors
Yes, yeah.
for the book?
Well, yes, I would suggest, in fact, the big they
Hmm.
say that you should have a website, especially if you write nonfiction, if you have a
Uh,
business in nonfiction. But um, people like to find a landing place for an author to find
mhm,
out what they're like and that kind
mhm.
of thing. So I think it's important. You also want to collect names for email lists, because they say that that's the most important thing, because that's the way
Uh-huh.
you connect to it. That's the only thing
Right.
you truly own. I mean,
Mhm,
I own my domain on my website, Yarm Del
mhm.
Baccio. And I love it because I can put down, in fact, I have to go back and connect this event there, but I have a list of all the places I've been. I do school talks and library talks and
Mhm,
whatever anybody wants me to do. I love
mhm.
to speak about the author's journey. But they also say that a blog is good, and I have a blog on my website, connected with my website. A blog is good
Okay.
because it keeps you writing.
That was my
um,
next question. So,
yes,
so the blog is connected to your website, that is
yes,
your author's website.
right,
So people can go, oh, well, let's see what she's posted. Well, let's
yes,
see what she's blogged about this time. And it keeps them coming back
yes,
rather
yeah,
than just being the old, oh, here's the latest
right.
book kind of thing.
Yeah, and it should keep them back. So
Yeah.
you could start your own a blog on its own, but then you've got to backpedal when you make a
When you make,
website
okay.
and connect it. So we have, mine is Weebly. Feel free to, it's just yarmdelbaccio.com. You can see how I've set it up and as
Mhm,
an author's page, and
mhm.
maybe get a few tips.
Yeah, yeah. I got to get going on that. Yeah. Okay. That's
And
all.
when does your book come out?
Next spring.
Oh,
So
okay. So
just
you've got
getting
time. Now's the
getting
time to
close.
do it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, that's the social media thing is the next thing I've got to attack because
Yeah.
I've gotten all of the blurbs and writing the tip sheets and all that kind of stuff. I've been working on that for a while.
And
Um,
I suggest that you connect with an author on the social media that is a humor writer that writes humor,
mm,
and maybe one that also writes about Catholic upbringing. I mean,
mhm.
I keep thinking of what was that Angela's Ashes. I mean, it's not a humorous
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, but you know
A
that
little
kind of
bit.
thing. Sorry.
Right. And yeah, there are other authors out there that have written. I had to find some comps
Yes.
for in there. It was hard to find comps for it that were not so old that they really were not
Mm,
valuable.
yes. That is very hard. Yeah.
Which maybe that's okay because it means that it's not flooding the market with stuff just like mine.
They say it's
Perhaps.
one or two things. Either it means that they're
Yeah,
just not publishing things like that anymore,
yeah.
or not popular, or it does mean that there's a hole in the market, which is good. So you just
Well,
kind of
I
have to
guess I'll
weigh.
find out. Yeah.
Yeah. But follow somebody that you and get into a writers group. Another thing, follow somebody that you
Mhm.
really admire, some author, and even if it's not an author that writes those specific things, but just
Sure.
someone that writes memoir
Right.
because you're a memoir. Someone who writes memoir that you really like, and follow them on their website and on social media. Maybe two, I would say maybe two or three, just because you're at the point
Mhm.
of publishing,
Mhm.
and see what they do. Even
Mhm.
on if you want to do Twitter, you don't really have to, but
Yeah.
um,
No, yeah.
I-
One
but
more
anyway,
thing, one more thing to have to check all the time.
exactly, exactly. You got it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's my next thing that I'm
Good thing
gonna
you
try
have
and
time.
navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least you got the time now, right?
Well, I do only that I've got a grandbaby ready to be born any day here. I'm
Oh,
gonna have to go
congratulations.
and a 2.5-year-old they've got already, so I'm gonna have to go to
Oh,
Milwaukee for a while, but
oh
I'm gonna
boy.
take my computer with me.
Yes, yes, I would.
Mhm. Yeah.
You can certainly read them a lot of books,
Oh,
at
yeah.
least.
Good Lord, yeah. Uh-huh.
Anyone else have any questions for me? Or certainly, if you after you get the PDF, if my website is on there and my email address,
Mhm.
feel free to to ask me questions later. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you might get some of those answered as
Answered
well.
anyway.
Um,
Okay.
and if you go back onto my blog, I mention a lot of things, especially during my book launch.
Mhm.
I have a whole sec. If you go back to April of 2019, actually February through April 2019 and into May, I have a lot of blog posts about the book launch and what it was like, and so that might be helpful as
Mhm.
well to go back there and see what I did, because I give people not only my impressions of things but helpful advice. So
Mhm. Okay, and all of that from all your contact information is gonna be in the PDF that we're gonna get.
yes, yeah, it's
Okay,
right at
great.
the end, right?
Okay, then I don't have to write anything down.
Right.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else?
Wow, we finished almost directly on time. That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll be sending out an email in the next hour or so, and I'll have this whole presentation will be up on Facebook, and I'll be getting it on YouTube shortly. So if there's anything you'd like to go back over, you can always use one of those.
And you'll send a link to those to YouTube as well as the Facebook.
Yep, that'll
Okay.
be in, and those, and feel free to share those links with anybody that you think that the presentation might be helpful for as well.
Well, thank you, Larissa. This has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed sharing what I have learned, and hopefully something will be helpful there, especially in the PDF. It's good to
Yep.
connect with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing the presentation. It's great to keep
Sure.
library moving.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.